Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, major controversy racking Democrats in New Hanover County as two of their school board candidates that won in the primary election remain under intense scrutiny. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand. It is totally free. You can do that in your favorite podcast app or by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. For any legal questions or challenges, lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through the program on this very busy Tuesday morning. Hopefully you enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. All things considered, beautiful weather across southeastern North Carolina. What was originally anticipated to be a much larger, much more widespread rain event, fortunately was able to stay just off the immediate coast, so hopefully you were able to enjoy that. Some of you may remember just a few days after the March primary, that was March the 3rd, back just a couple of months ago, we brought you some very interesting controversies taking place in New Hanover County as it related to the New Hanover County Board of Education. For those that did not follow that at the time, maybe missed that show back in early March, what took place in right after and in the during the process of the March primary was that 4 candidates from the Democrat Party and 4 candidates from the Republican Party won their primary election and were set to advance towards the general election. There are 4 seats currently up on the New Hanover County Board of Education coming up in November of this year. These are partisan elections. 4 candidates from each side move through the primary and will be or were expected to be the general election candidates for their respective parties coming up later on this year. We brought you details just 2 days after the March primary that one of the Democrat candidates that had won and was successful in advancing through a very contentious, very heated Democrat primary in New Hanover County by the name of Rick Sutherland decided just 2 days after the primary that he was going to withdraw from the race. Why was that the case? Well, there was a major exclusive story published by Ben Shotman over at WHQR, that is the NPR affiliate in Wilmington, highlighting that Rick Sutherland was either in a relationship or, at best, living with an individual by the name of James Osborne, who is a registered, convicted sex offender. And that, of course, is a major problem as in this case, Rick Sutherland was attempting to become a member of the New Hanover County Board of Education dealing with the K-12 public education system in New Hanover County in the city of Wilmington. Major problems there. Sutherland did not bother telling anybody within the Democrat Party prior to the March the 3rd election that he was, in fact, living with an individual, again, by the name of James Osborne, who is a registered sex offender and pled guilty in 2021 to multiple child pornography charges up in the state of Virginia. And so days after the primary, we learned, and I shouldn't say days, I should say a day or two after the primary election, this information comes to light. The news is broken by Ben Shotman over at WHQR, and thus we have this report that's out. Rick Sutherland facing pressure from his party, facing controversy from within just the general electorate that, of course, and no surprise, finds themselves disgusted with the fact that Sutherland is living and could potentially be in a relationship with a registered sex offender. He drops out of the race. This is literally 2 days after the Democrat primary and the Republican primary on March the 5th of this year. We went through all of those details as they were relevant here on the show at that time. If you missed that, You can check out that show in your podcast app. You can go to our YouTube or Rumble or Facebook or X feeds and view that episode of that show. But that was the long story short. Court records confirmed that James Osborne, who was living at the exact same address as Rick Sutherland, is in fact a registered sex offender following a 2021 child porn conviction in which he pled guilty to those charges. So Sutherland drops out. They replace him over the span of a couple of weeks. Now, new controversy for yet another Democrat who won in the school board election is making news across southeastern North Carolina today as the Democrat Party has decided to only support 3 out of their 4 nominees moving through towards the general election because another Democrat that won in the primary, Wendy Dale, who I'll note received the second most votes in the March primary, has a lengthy criminal history. This report being broken by Connor Smith over at WECT News. Dale declined to sit down and do an on-camera interview, but did respond to a lengthy set of emails from Connor Smith and WECT on Monday and noted that she plans to stay in the race even though now that the party has chosen not to support her, which is going to be, I would argue, a major problem for the Democrat Party. As I mentioned, there are 4 seats available. The top 4 vote getters, there'll be 8 candidates in the general election. Top 4 vote getters will move on and become either sworn in or re-sworn in to the Board of Education, as there are multiple Republicans running for re-election that have been serving on the board now for 4 years. And so I think it is fair to say that Democrats, and I think this is emblematic of a larger problem across the board, Democrats are in, I would continue to say, free fall. They are struggling in a variety of different fashions, in a variety of different places all over the United States in what should be, and you've heard me say this many a times, a relatively successful banner year for Democrats. This is a midterm election that we are staring down the barrel at coming up here in early November. What does a midterm election typically mean? Well, for the party that's in charge, that would be currently the Republican Party, things tend to not fare out very well. Why is that the case? Well, voters generally kind of flip-flop back and forth. You've got this middle block of the electorate that say, oh, we gave these people a shot, let's give the other side a shot. That is why midterm elections typically work out that way. Plus, it is a lot easier to complain about what the party that is in charge is doing versus what you would actually do, right? We know that anger and fear and outrage is a much stronger motivator for voters than, hey, I've been doing, or we as a party have been doing a really good job. Come out and elect us. Come out and give us another opportunity to continue to govern, continue to lead. And it is unfortunate that that is not a larger driver for voters, but that's just the way that it is. And this is a problem that is relevant across party lines. The Democrat Party deals with this. The Republican Party deals with this as well. It is very hard to motivate your base. It is very hard to motivate voters to come out and support you when you're doing a good job. It's just not that interesting. It doesn't drive emotion. It doesn't drive people to get up off the couch, get up off the sideline, and actually get involved with what's going on. It's unfortunate that that's the case, but that is the very real reality of political elections. So that's why, again, fear, anger, outrage, that stuff is a very good motivating factor. Hence why midterm elections typically do not favor the party in charge, because the party that is not in charge uses the anger, the fear, the outrage to motivate their base, to motivate voters, and to motivate the general electorate to show up and fight back against the individuals that they have just demagogued. Both parties do this. That is why historically midterm elections never favor the party that is in charge. This is not something that is new. This is not something that is because of MAGA and Donald Trump. Nope, this is just the way that midterm elections have played out now for decades. And so, again, what should be a banner year for Democrats across the nation, we are already starting to see cracks form. We are already starting to see some major issues in what I will call critically important areas across the United States. Critically important places here in North Carolina, of which New Hanover County is. New Hanover County is very much a representative of the state of North Carolina as a whole, with its very diverse voter makeup and very diverse voter population. It's why you may have heard in the past New Hanover County and the city of Wilmington described as kind of a bellwether county in the state of North Carolina. You've probably seen, and I have stated that multiple times. All right, so back to the news of the day. Wendy Dale, who was the second highest vote getter in the Democrat primary just back a couple of months ago in early March of this year, is now facing additional controversy and is facing calls from her own party, the New Hanover County Democrat Party, to drop out of the race due to recent publications and recent reports highlighting a very lengthy criminal history. Dale has been convicted of 4 misdemeanors with multiple stints behind bars, according to court records. The convictions include disorderly conduct, criminal contempt, communicating threats, stalking, and obstructing a highway. All convictions are over a decade old, but court records also revealed a 2016 probation violation and at least 1 bankruptcy filing. So here's a little bit of the background. The disorderly conduct charge, or disorderly conduct conviction, I should say, a difference between a conviction and a charge, was tied to an argument with a police officer in 2012. Dale said that court records say she cursed and banged on an Orange County jail door and scratched an officer after learning that her son has been arrested. Dale was sentenced to 30 days behind bar with 12 months of supervised probation after the fact, according to court records. Dale says that there were no witnesses at the jail besides 3 police officers. So that's 2012. We then flash forward a couple of years to 2014. Then Raleigh police arrested Dale on charges of misdemeanor stalking and communicating threats. She pled guilty to these charges and was sentenced to 45 days in jail with 6 months of supervised probation after the fact, again, according to court records. Dale said that she couldn't provide context on that case because of a consent order, which is a pretty common thing, but I'll note she pled guilty to the charges. And so I think it is fair to state when somebody pleads guilty to those charges, in this case, misdemeanor stalking and communicating threats, she obviously felt that she had a better chance of pleading guilty, serving 45 days in jail, than taking this all the way to a full trial, likely losing, because in large part she was probably guilty, and facing significantly more penalties. That was in early 2014. We then go to November of 2014. That's when Dale pled guilty to criminal contempt, which she said was tied to stalking and communicating threats case and a no contact order. Dale was sentenced to 30 days in jail with 12 months of supervised probation after that. Dale noted in an interview with WECT News, an email exchange, not an on-camera interview, quote, this is directly from her, I think it is important to note that these incidents involved no actual violence, and it was never my intent to harm anyone. So that's her claim. That's her case. On Monday, Dale also disclosed that she was convicted for obstructing a highway after participating in a protest outside the 2000 Republican National Convention in Philadelphia. She's just so typical to what you see now when Democrats don't get their way, when things aren't going right. You know, they stand on I-40, they stand on major interstates, block major roadways, which of course is illegal. You are blocking a federally or state-funded, in large part both, funded roadway. You are completely disrupting traffic flow. You are putting emergency responders, ambulances, fire, police, sheriff, whatever it might be, You are putting them in a miserable position where they literally cannot respond to calls. But of course, in typical Democrat fashion, that's what's going on. That was all the way back in the year 2000 because Republicans are so terrible and awful. She decided to obstruct a highway outside of Philadelphia. The most recent case is in November of 2018 when Dale filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, according to court records. When asked if she was confident she could help oversee millions of dollars worth of public monies as it related to the school board despite this filing, Dale said she was, pointing to over 10 years of experience managing and negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts for technology companies. She went on to say, bankruptcy in my case was not a personal failure, but rather a legally available survival tool made necessary by an economic system that assumes very little responsibility for women and children. No idea what she's talking about. She goes on to say, this work experience has required me to analyze systems, ask hard questions, and make sure resources are used wisely and efficiently. In my opinion, I'm actually one of the better qualified Democrat candidates to oversee these types of complex functions. Dale admitted on Monday to Connor Smith over at WECT News that she didn't fully disclose her past to party leaders before the March primary. That lack of transparency has fueled friction within the party, according to multiple county Democrats that spoke to WECT News. When asked why she didn't reveal her past to voters before the election, Dale said she didn't disclose her stalking conviction to Jill Hotman, who is the chair of the local Democrat Party, and other campaigns, but didn't discuss her record publicly because of, quote, legal restraints and other internal party concerns. This is nuts. It is accurate to say now that 50% of the Democrats that made it through the Democrat primary in New Hanover County for school board have very shady, very questionable decision-making and very questionable pasts. 50%. There was 4 candidates that made it through the primary. One of them, in Rick Sutherland, literally dropped out of the race 2 days later, and now here we are just a couple of months later, and Wendy Dale, who has a past a pretty lengthy criminal track record going all the way back to the year 2000, multiple charges, 2014, 2018, dealing with a bankruptcy, 2012, attacking a police officer within Orange County. I mean, these are major things that should have been disclosed to voters, but they were not. Why was that the case? I think that's what I think many individuals are scratching their head about right now. How is it that somebody runs for public office like this without disclosing this information? I am all for second chances. I am all for people admitting that they made a mistake, they did something wrong, they made bad decision, a single bad decision or a series of bad decisions, and have rectified those things, have served their time, in the case of Dale, a couple of different stints in jail, probation afterwards, and have come out of that on the other side. I am all for that. But I would also at that same time argue that if that is in your past, if that is something that you have dealt with, you have an obligation as somebody that is asking for the public's trust, somebody who received over 11,000 votes from citizens in New Hanover County, you absolutely have to disclose that information. You absolutely need to make that available to your voters, because not everybody believes in a second chance. Not everybody believes that it would be appropriate to elect somebody with some of this stuff in their background. But that, again, is up for the voters to decide. That is up for the voters to determine whether they want to move forward with a candidate that has some of these issues in their past. When you shield that, when you hide that information from voters, you are lying to them. You are misleading them, and I suspect that is in large part why the local Democrat Party has chosen not to endorse one of their primary candidates. It is because she deceived and lied to voters. She purposefully did not make this information public ahead of the March the 3rd primary. And it has put the Democrats in a miserable, miserable situation. I'll have some more on this coming up here in just a couple of minutes, plus what this means in a larger sense for politics within southeastern North Carolina, New Hanover County as well. That coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the law group here in Wilmington. Melissa Gott and her team. When legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Going all the way back to 2003, Melissa Gott and her team of experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. Back now almost 6 years ago when I was going through the process as a first-time home buyer, not really fully knowing exactly what I was getting myself into, I reached out to Melissa and her team and said, hey, this is what's going on. I immediately got in touch with her, and they helped me walk through every step of the process of navigating a real estate transaction as a first-time home buyer. Their dedicated team made sure all of my questions, and I had plenty of them, were answered as quickly as possible. The process went through smoothly. I also note this was in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, so things were very screwed up at the state and local level as well. Regardless of those issues, Melissa Gott and her team helped me every step of the way. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088. or online, lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. More of the disarray within the New Hanover County Democrat Party coming up after this as the Nick Craig Show continues. Streaming live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Tuesday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. We are continuing to cover a very significant story rocking politics across southeastern North Carolina. The Democrats in total freefall, total disarray in New Hanover County, where 2 of their 4 candidates that won in the March the 3rd primary, one of them has already dropped out after it came to light that he was living with a registered sex offender who pled guilty to child pornography charges up in the state of Virginia back in 2021. That was just days after the primary election. And news today from Connor Smith over at WECT News in Wilmington, bringing forth interesting information about Wendy Dale, another Democrat candidate who has a criminal history, including multiple stints in jail, assaulting law enforcement officers, stalking individuals in and around the Raleigh area, also dealing with bankruptcies, obstructing, standing in the middle of a highway in front of the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia back in the year 2000. Just a litany of issues that should have been made public. And I was just mentioning this before the break. Again, I think voters and people in general say people make mistakes. People do stupid and dumb things that they regret. We all have, we all will. Nobody is perfect. This is not the premise of this whole discussion is not, oh, the only people that we can deal with are individuals that have a perfectly clean background and have no controversies and no issues. No, that's not the case at all. We're all flawed. We all make mistakes. The question I think that I have, and I think the issue that I would assume that voters are likely dealing with in New Hanover County is, why was this not made public? Why was this information not brought to voters beforehand? Right? This is important. You are talking about electing somebody that is responsible for the K through 12 public education system. New Hanover County is one of the larger school districts in the state of North Carolina. And like many other school systems across the state of North Carolina, with it being such a large system, it is one of the largest employers. There are thousands of employees you are responsible for, tens of thousands of children across the district, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of budgets. I mean, this is not just some Bush League government that we're dealing with. We see these discussions and similar things taking place in other areas across the state as well, whether it's in Charlotte or Raleigh or Asheville. Right? These are major decisions that are made in these government entities, whether it's school board, a county commission, a city council, doesn't matter, that affect a lot of people. You're talking about tens of thousands of families across an area that are affected by decisions of a school board. And so when it comes to light, 3 months after the primary, that, hey, one of the candidates here has a pretty significant criminal background, multiple issues, multiple run-ins with law enforcement, has filed for bankruptcy. This is something that I would assume voters want to know. So I did what any sane, normal person would do. I went over to Reddit, which is a liberal cesspool all across the Reddit platform. It is completely taken over by those on the political left. Some of the most illogical situations and illogical comments taking place there. And there, in fact, was a post about this on the Wilmington subreddit. So I decided I was going to peruse through some of the comments and see what the reaction was, what the responses were. Now, again, does this speak for everybody? No. But there are a couple of specific comments in here that I want to read to you that I think really show that the Democrat Party has completely lost the plot. One of the comments in particular from a Reddit user reads, "I don't really care about it, honestly. I don't find any of it a danger to children, but having a MAGA board will. I don't need to love her. I just need her to vote for better schools." So let me make sure I understand this. I'm trying to wrap my head around these very intelligent comments on the Wilmington subreddit. A group of MAGA, whatever that means. You mean, okay, so Republicans that currently hold the majority on the school board. They are worse and are significantly worse off at their job than a woman who has proven through the legal system that has a pretty hot temper, I think that would be fair to say, has pled guilty to stalking charges in Raleigh, assaulted a law enforcement officer back in 2012, filed for bankruptcy in 2018. The response is, none of this is a danger to children, but MAGA is. Accurate to say that this is Trump derangement syndrome on full display. Here is an individual with a lengthy criminal background, but MAGA is bad. Some of the other comments included, oh, well, Donald Trump is a criminal as well. He filed for bankruptcy. So I guess with that issue going on, then this is totally normal. This is not a problem at all. This is totally normal. And so with that, I guess Democrats are totally conceding the point that because they believe that the current president of the United States is an immoral character, they will flush all of their morals down the drain, which is, by the way, a fine opinion to have. But I don't ever want to be lectured again about how Donald Trump is a criminal, he's a crook, he's filed for bankruptcy, so on and so forth. You can't have it both ways. And this is, of course, the only way in which Democrats operate. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to yell and scream about somebody like Donald Trump and his background. Then you press them on one of their candidates and they say, oh, well, Donald Trump is a scumbag, therefore this is totally okay. This is totally fine. Okay, so you're conceding the point that none of this stuff matters. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that, but if that's your stance, and as long as you want to be morally consistent on that, that's fine. But you have to have some consistency. The old adage, without double standards, Democrats would have no standards at all. Great comment coming in on the show. They don't have morals to flush. Good point as well. That's the reaction. Oh, well, this stuff isn't that bad. And MAGA and Republicans are much worse, so we'll just move forward with this individual. So now let's kind of go more into what some of the reaction has been to this. Jill Hopman, who is the chair of the New Hanover County Democrat Party, also quoted in this article, said this: transparency is a requirement to run for public office, and the New Hanover County Democrat Party's endorsement is a privilege, not an entitlement. We stand by our decision and look forward to helping elect this slate in November. There are only 3 candidates that the Democrat Party has endorsed locally, Wendy Dale not being one of them, of course, because of some of this on her background. Dale responded to that saying, quote, the reality is that I would have been bent over backwards to retain party support, even if that meant publicly discussing my record. But I have been warned against doing so by Jill and her publicist. They were adamant that the public discussion would result in the Republicans weaponizing the issue. Other Democrats, including current school board member Tim Merrick, who is one of just 2 Democrats on the New Hanover County Board of Education, are also pushing Dale to drop out, with Merrick saying he called Dale on May the 14th, asking her to withdraw, but never heard back. So this is really blowing up in the Democrats' face. There is now going to be a candidate on the ballot. They can't force her to drop out. The only thing that would cause her to be forced off the ballot would be a felony conviction that would make her incapable of serving in office. But outside of that, nobody can force her to drop out. In this case, we're talking about Wendy Dale. You can't force her. You can ratchet up the public pressure. Yeah, you can make phone calls and you can get op-eds published and try and ratchet up the public pressure. But if she is locked in, and it would appear at this point that she is, things obviously can change. We're a long way away from November. She can and likely will stay in this race. And there is nothing that the Democrat Party can do, and vice versa. If this was a group of Republicans we were talking about, it'd be the exact same situation. The party cannot force a candidate to drop out of the race. And so what is this going to mean moving forward for Democrats in a critically important area of the state of North Carolina, New Hanover County? Right? That is the $1 million question. That is, I think, what a lot of this discussion is going to revolve around in the weeks and months to come. Wrapping up the discussion on more controversy, the Democrats in free fall in New Hanover County, as it was announced last week that the New Hanover County Democrat Party would only endorse 3 out of their 4 candidates, only 2 of them actually making it through the primary. They include Margie Gwartzman, Jerry Jones Jr., and Brittany LaRue, the 4th candidate, and Wendy Dale, who was the 2nd highest vote getter in the March primary, is not being endorsed by her own party after criminal records came to light, or criminal history came to light over the last couple of weeks, dealing with multiple charges going all the way back to 2012 when she assaulted a police officer in Orange County. In 2014, misdemeanor stalking and communicating threats charges that she again pled guilty to in Raleigh, a bankruptcy in 2018, some big time issues for an individual that wants to run the school system. And this puts the Democrats in a completely miserable situation. As I mentioned at the open, like many other races that you see across the state of North Carolina, you've got these pick 4, pick 3, pick 2 races. In the case of this, it's a pick 4 contest. The top 4 vote getters in the general election will win and be sworn onto the New Hanover County Board of Education. There will be 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Top 4 could be a mix, could be one party sweeping, the other party sweeping. The top 4 move through. So 8 candidates, only 4 win. It's a pick 4 contest, 4 voters coming up in November of this year. So what does this mean for the Democrat Party? Well, they're trying to regain, I should say, a majority on the New Hanover County Board of Education right now. Republicans swept the board in 2022 in the months and years after COVID lockdowns, inappropriate books in classrooms, discussions over whether it was appropriate or not to have biological men in women's sports and in women's locker rooms. All of those discussions taking place in early 2022. It was able to rise to the occasion and give Republicans the ability to sweep the New Hanover County Board of Education and take the majority. I'll, of course, note 2022, a midterm election with Democrats in charge that favored Republicans in large part across the United States, and we saw that play out here in North Carolina as well. So Republicans are trying to retain that majority with all 4 of the Republican board members up for all 4 of their terms up, a couple of them running for a re-election to try and maintain that majority. There are 2 Democrats currently on the board. There is one Republican who won back in 2024, but has decided that it was a great idea to switch his party affiliation from Republican, of which he was elected, to now a libertarian candidate, continuing to stonewall on the board and make a complete fool of himself, seemingly at every single board meeting. And so with this pick 4 contest, you're only going to have the Democrats endorsing 3 candidates, which means the likelihood of at least one Republican making it through the general election significantly higher. And I would argue giving Republicans a greater edge in winning the election overall. Now, again, it's a midterm election. Typically does not favor the party in charge. You would expect a lot of Democrat activation. We know that they're constantly mad and yelling at the sky about Donald Trump and how evil, awful, and terrible he is. Democrats, turns out, they're pretty engaged. They're pretty activated. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out moving forward in this election in November. The other big question is, how does something like this happen? You have 2 of your candidates that you just waltzed around the area, convinced tens of thousands of people to show up and vote for in the March 3rd primary. One of them has already resigned because he was living with a convicted sex offender. The other is now staying in the race, but no longer being endorsed by the Democrat Party. How does something like this happen? And I think the only answer to it is, there's a couple, but 2 main answers I see. A, the Democrat Party is doing zero vetting of their candidates whatsoever, meaning any random person that has a D next to their name can show up to a Democrat Party headquarters, show up to a Democrat Party meeting, and become their candidate or one of their many candidates. That's the first potential possibility here. Or the second is that the Democrat Party knew about this, which Wendy Dale claims. The Democrat Party seems to disagree with that in New Hanover County. The second is they knew about it. They knew that this was very damning for their candidate, but they just hoped that it wouldn't come to light. They just hoped that this would not become a major controversy. They hoped that this would not become a major issue, or they hoped that they could force the candidate to resign or withdraw after the primary, and then the party itself could anoint the next candidate, right? We saw this with the National Democrat Party back in 2024. Kamala Harris. She didn't receive a single vote in a Democrat caucus or primary across the country. Yet, lo and behold, after Joe Biden in July of 2023, or 2024, decided that he was going to step aside, that he was going to walk away and not run for re-election, the Democrat Party, without asking a single voter to cast a ballot, had the ability to prop up the failing vice president in Kamala Harris, who then, of course, would go on to get absolutely destroyed in the November general election. Because with these candidates withdrawing, Rick Sutherland, the first, now calls for Wendy Dale to resign as well. It is not the voters that get to decide the replacement. It is the party apparatus. Now, I understand why that process exists. It is not practical to host another election for a relatively small political office in terms of the amount of individuals that show up and vote for this. There was only, I think, 14,000 votes for the top vote getter in the Democrat primary. And of course, there were a lot more races on the ballot in March. You would see numbers in the hundreds, maybe few thousand that would show up for another election to replace said candidate. It's not practical. It's not economically feasible. It's not the process as it's laid out in state law. And so the question then becomes, if the party knew about this beforehand, did they just hope that this candidate would get through the primary, they could force said candidate out after she had won or he had won in the primary, and then anoint who they thought could win in November, right? Without ever having received a single vote from voters in New Hanover County or anywhere else across the state of North Carolina. I don't know which one of those possible examples are worse. I would say knowing that this information was out there, knowing that this was a major liability from your candidate, one of your candidates, and not doing anything about it is probably worse. Because this is a major question of transparency. This is a major question of why is this information not being given to voters? As a voter myself, I expect if there is a candidate of mine that I am supporting that has major issues in their background, that they bring that to the forefront so that I can decide, am I electing a candidate that has the best chance of winning in November? That's what a primary is about. That is what a primary is for. Not to get the most votes over other Republicans. No, it's who is best suited to beat. As a Republican, as a conservative, my vote is who is best to beat a Democrat in November. Who is best to beat a Democrat when the main election rolls around? And when you have candidates that have major liabilities and that stuff does not come to fruition, that information does not come forward, that absolutely sways how a voter casts their ballots during a primary election. So Democrats in free fall in New Hanover County. We'll keep an eye on the details right here on the Nick Craig Show. What a wild situation. What a miserable spot to be in as the local Democrat Party. Again, where do you go from here? I don't know. literally 50% of the candidates they've elected are facing major controversies. One of them already dropped out. The other says, essentially gives the middle finger to the party and says, you're not going to force me out of this election. I'm going to stay in it. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. It's just a wild situation to watch unfold. But genuinely, I can't tell you that I'm surprised or shocked with the level of candidates that are brought forward at the local level here across the state of North Carolina. I think as a whole, we've seen these disastrous candidates in many other areas across the state as well. So again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm completely surprised, completely shocked that this is playing out the way that it is. We'll keep an eye on the back and forth over on right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right. Well, that is going to do it for a Tuesday edition. Want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Is also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast apps and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.